Have you ever heard about the fruit that's supposedly like 10,000 times stronger than chemotherapy? Yeah, it's a claim that is all over the internet. You see it in health forums, people talk about it like it's this hidden miracle cure. We're talking about soursop. But what's the real story? Is it a cancer killer or is something else going on? Okay, let's get into it. You've probably scrolled past a headline or a video making these incredible claims. And, it's compelling. It's definitely hopeful. But it makes you wonder, right? Is there any actual solid evidence to back this up? Or is it just internet hype? That is exactly what we're here to unpack. So first things first, let's meet the star of the show. This is soursop. It's this kind of heart-shaped, spiky green fruit, and it's got a really unique sweet and sour taste. You might also hear it called Graviola or Guanabana, depending on where you are in the world. And it's been a staple in traditional medicine for centuries, which is really where this whole story kicks off. To really understand where these massive claims come from, we have to look under the hood. We've got to see what's actually inside this fruit. So let's start by unpacking the science and figure out what specific compounds have got researchers so interested. For generations, different parts of the soursop plant, we're talking the leaves, the fruit, the seeds, the whole thing, have been used in traditional medicine all over the tropics. I mean, they've used it for a whole host of ailments, everything from parasitic infections and fevers to diabetes and, yeah, you guessed it, even cancer. This long history is exactly why scientists decided to take a closer look. And when they started digging, they zeroed in on something really specific. The main active ingredients in soursop belong to this unique class of compounds called acetogenins. Now that's a mouthful, but they're basically these special fatty acid derivatives, and they are the absolute star players when it comes to soursop's potential anti-cancer story. In fact, if you look at the chemical breakdown of what's inside soursop, these acetogenins are by far the most abundant active compound. They make up nearly half of the key chemicals in there, so this just perfectly illustrates why so much of the research has focused specifically on them. So that leads us right into part two. We know about these acetogenins, but what happens when you actually take soursop extracts and put them up against cancer cells in a lab? Well, this is where the story starts to get really, really promising. In lab studies, and I need you to remember that phrase, in lab studies, these acetogenins are incredibly powerful. They wage a three-pronged attack on cancer cells. First, they stop the production of something called ATP, which is the cell's main energy source. It's basically like cutting the power cord to the cancer cell. Second, they can halt the cell in its tracks, stopping it from dividing and making more cancer cells. And third, they can trigger something called apoptosis, which is basically programmed cell death, telling the cancer cell to self-destruct. Now, here's the really crucial part. One of the most exciting things to come out of these lab tests is a concept called selective cytotoxicity. What that means is that the acetogenins seem to be able to hunt down and kill cancer cells, specifically, while leaving the normal, healthy cells around them totally unharmed. I mean, in cancer research, that is the holy grail. But, and it is a huge but, this is all happening in a petri dish. And that brings us to part three, the critical caveats. This is where we have to hit the brakes and separate what's happening in a lab from the incredibly complex reality of treating cancer in an actual person. Why doesn't a home run in the lab automatically mean we have a cure? To really get the picture, let's look at a big, comprehensive review from 2024. Researchers set out to find every single scientific paper ever published on soursop and cancer. And at first, they found 516 of them. Sounds like a lot of research, right? Well, after they weeded out all the duplicates, all the animal studies, all the lab studies, and anything that didn't meet their strict scientific criteria, do you know how many human clinical trials were left to analyze? 5. Just 5. That drop from 516 to 5 is staggering, and it just screams how little research has actually been done in people. And honestly, it gets worse. When those same researchers looked at the quality of those 5 human studies, the results were just damning. This graph shows what's called a risk of bias assessment. Red means a high risk of bias, basically that the study is flawed. And as you can see, every single one of those studies is lit up in red. Their conclusions just aren't reliable. So what made them so bad? The problems were fundamental. We're talking tiny groups of patients, really poorly explained methods, and most of the studies only lasted 8 weeks. And here's the kicker. Many didn't even test soursop's effect inside the patient's body. They took a patient's blood and then tested that on cancer cells in a lab. On top of all that, we have absolutely no idea what a safe or effective dose would even be for a human. All right, so let's pull all of this together in our final takeaway. How do we make sense of these two conflicting stories? The incredible promise in the lab and the deeply flawed, almost non-existent evidence in humans. It all comes down to separating the hope from the hype. Here is the bottom line. On one hand, you have the promise, and it's real. Soursop absolutely contains powerful compounds that kill cancer cells in a lab. But on the other hand, you have the reality, which is just as clear. There is a profound, massive lack of rigorous, high-quality human trials to show that eating this fruit or taking an extract can actually treat cancer in people. And there's one more piece of the puzzle we have to talk about, and it's a big one: safety. Remember those powerful acetogenins? Well, they're also known neurotoxins. Research has actually linked long-term, continuous consumption of soursop to atypical neurodegenerative disorders, something similar to Parkinson's. So this is not a harmless fruit you can just take without any worries. In the end, the conclusion from the very scientists who reviewed all of this evidence really says it all. They state, and I'm quoting here, "The absence of high-quality studies and incomplete evidence pose challenges in drawing conclusive statements. More research is required." That, right there, is the current scientific consensus. So we're left with this final question. Is soursop a potential future medicine, just waiting for the right research to finally unlock its secrets? Or is it a cautionary tale about the dangerous gap that can open up between our desperate hope for a cure and what the actual science can prove? Right now, the truth is somewhere in that uncertainty.